We frequently take for granted that schools are the way they are. This education system gives every student equal opportunities. However, it was not always this way. Students used to be separated by race, gender, and other factors. People even saw this as something normal that should always stay the same, despite the rights taken away from these less fortunate students. This system continued for many years until this one Supreme Court decision. This ruling would hugely change education for decades to come, securing the rights of millions of Black Americans. This is the case of Brown versus Board of Education.
Even after the abolishment of slavery, most people at this time considered non-whites to be below them, to be almost less than human. Specifically for children, segregation was a huge problem with students in schools. Black schools were usually farther away from main residential areas, funded less, and generally of worse quality. Unfortunately, most white parents at this time believed their kids would be corrupted by integration. An important case strengthening segregation's hold on society was Plessy versus Ferguson.
Plessy v. Ferguson was a landmark decision in the Supreme Court ruling in favor of the Jim Crow laws and segregation. The Supreme Court, in the majority opinion presented by Justice Henry Brown, stated, "We consider the underlying fallacy of Plessy's argument to consist in the assumption that the enforced separation of the two races stamps the colored race with a badge of inferiority. If this be so, it is not by reason of anything found in the act, but solely because the colored race chooses to put that construction upon it." Someone living in today's world will notice that this is objectively immoral, not to mention the decision was not even upheld in most school districts, as colored schools' quality was at a much lower level than their white counterparts. So something must have been done to change this precedent.
The first lawsuit relating to Brown versus Board was in 1951, when a group of 13 parents in Topeka, Kansas, filed a class action lawsuit against the local school board. They argued that simply the idea of a segregated school system was fundamentally unfair. The NAACP, an organization dedicated to securing equal rights for African Americans, recruited this group to further their goal of rights. Because the NAACP failed to prove any discrimination happening in the district and was, to the eyes of the court, simply challenging the precedent made in Plessy versus Ferguson, the district court decision in Brown versus Board ended with the court siding on the Topeka Board of Education's side. However, while this was happening, other cases on the same topic were emerging all across the country. These lawsuits include Freeman versus County School Board, Ricks versus Elliott, Davis versus County School Board, and Gebhardt versus Belton. All lawsuits were filed around the same time for the same purpose. All plaintiffs were demanding equal rights for their children. Since all cases failed at the district level, Brown and the other plaintiffs appealed to the Supreme Court.
Brown v. Board presented the court with a significant constitutional question. Did the segregation of public schools violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause? The Supreme Court decided to consider the case. All 5 claims were grouped into one under the name Brown v. Board of Education. The petitioners, represented by the NAACP and its lead attorney Thurgood Marshall, argued that segregation in public schools created inequality even if those facilities seemed to be equal. They presented psychological studies, including the famous doll test, which demonstrated how segregation negatively affected the self-esteem and development of African American children, along with photos taken from Morton High School, a black school, and Farmville High School, a white school, which showed the true conditions of African American facilities. The court case was decided on May 17, 1954. It was agreed on that day that the law stating that public schools were segregated and equal was unconstitutional. The ruling in Plessy v. Ferguson was overturned. African American school kids could now go to any school available to them. Lives were changed in many different ways. On the topic of the majority opinion, the Supreme Court's decision declared, "In the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal."
As mentioned, this landmark ruling effectively overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, declaring school segregation unconstitutional. The Supreme Court recognized that segregation denied African American students the equal protection guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment and reinforced the idea that equality must extend to all aspects of life, starting with education. Despite the victory, the road to integration was met with significant resistance, especially in the South. Many Southern states executed procedures to delay or avoid desegregation, leading to further court battles and necessary federal intervention. One such example is of Virginia Senator Harry F. Byrd, who used his power to organize a large resistance group against the ruling. As a result of this, the Supreme Court issued Brown II, an order directed to the South, essentially telling them to desegregate their schools. The court stated schools must integrate with all deliberate speed. Unfortunately, most of the South was unconcerned with this ruling, as the phrase all deliberate speed was unclear. In spite of the South's indignance, the decision in Brown v. Board of Education and the order sent through Brown II sent shockwaves throughout the United States. While it did not immediately desegregate schools, it sent a strong legal precedent and provided momentum for the civil rights movement.
But I think the diversification brings a different perspective for all students. I think they offer, along with the teacher, offer a lot more from different cultural backgrounds and experiences. It offers a lot more to the learning experience. And I think it helps students ultimately when they're adults and enter society, they are able to accept, listen, and communicate better with varying perspectives on all topics that are covered in school.
As one can see from the interview, diversity in schools helps students dramatically. Students from different backgrounds are now able to intermingle, letting kids learn about different cultures. Furthermore, the integration of all groups into one school system makes it much harder to deny opportunities to protected classes. A person, no matter what they are, can receive a good education and have the opportunity to have a good future. To summarize, Brown v. Board of Education was one of the most important cases in American history, securing the right of education for all races and being another huge leap for civil rights. This case changed the lives of countless young Americans, giving them the right to a good education, or at least equal to their white counterparts, and reinforcing the government's responsibility to treat all their citizens equally. Of course, the integration of schools must not be the final steps towards equal rights. Brown v. Board should not be the final stop. While us Americans get to enjoy this freedom, we must swear to protect it.